It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rob, and welcome to my State of the Dungeon address. Today's State of the Dungeon address is from the session that took place on April 1st, 2021. Yes, April Fool's Day. Much foolery was had. However, this is the Safe for Work edition, where we will not be discussing inappropriate topics on what happened, even though there wasn't any, profanity or anything in my not so safe for work version. Some of the events that took place weren't quite as appropriate for younger folks or people with delicate sensibilities, and quite honestly, this could really only have taken place if two of our party members had not shown up, which was the case. The youngest member of our group, who is a minor, and therefore would basically, we would not have any kind of even very slightly risque stuff. I am a conscientious GM that way. So this one went a little bit, people were in high spirits, let's just say. So this will be the safe version. It will also be much shorter because the not-so-safe stuff took up a lot of time. We were in more of a chatty mood, so we did not progress the story very much, which I hope the people who missed will be, I hope they're happy for that, because that means they'll get to experience more of the adventure. But we were missing the players of our elf and our thief for this group. And, both core members of the group, so they kind of dragged their heels a little bit. When we were in a talky mood, there were things to celebrate. April's here, the weather's getting better, and I showed them elements for the next adventures that we're going to be doing. The next session, because they're doing so well with the games that we've played so far, they'll get to their pick of the game that we play next out of a selection of 6 that I'm drafting up from suggestions they gave me, and also ones that I just really want to play. So after that, we will begin our first campaign. And excitingly enough, that campaign will not be here at arm's reach, but it will be Gooey Cube's The Darkest Dream. I've been really looking forward to running this game with all of its accessories and everything, so it's going to be fun. So that's what we're doing. Also, I announced, for those of you who are interested, that I myself have gotten a writing job writing an adventure for Gooey Cube, which I'm happy about, and hopefully you'll enjoy it in the future if you are interested. It should be my first somewhat solo published work, and with the Gooey Cube treatment, it's going to be awesome. I just promise you that. So, good times. But we really kind of enjoyed ourselves as much as anything. One of the players got a copy of the D&D cookbook, Hero's Feast, and she made us iron rations for everybody at the table, which was pretty awesome. It is the D&D version of Chex Mix. But unlike Chex Mix, where you take a bunch of cereal that you normally would never eat, I mean, Chex tastes like, the shavings you have inside of a pencil sharpener. I kid. But usually you take that, you dump a bunch of salt and seasonings on top of it, and you bake it so all the flavors are all just kind of smushed together. And then you can eat it just easy and fine. Maybe with some roasted peanuts or something. Well, pretzels, yeah, there's stuff that goes into it. Basically, you're trying to make Chex into Gardettos. It's my opinion of it. But iron rations, on the other hand, is a little bit like that, except the impetus isn't as much on blending all the flavors as it is giving you a selection of food that you can pick out and enjoy as you wish. And what makes it different is there are some Chex flavors in there. That's a core staple. You want your bread stuffs. There's fruit, there's dried apricots, dried cherries, dried blueberries, and dried dates, which are really good. They add a nice sweetness to the mix. There were also mixed nuts, so you had macadamia nuts, you had walnuts, almonds, cashews. She also put some pistachios in, which was excellent. I love pistachios. And another twist on the whole thing was that there was little turkey sausage sticks, which were really good, and chunks of steak nuggets, probably from one of those prepackaged things like a Jack Link's or something like that. It was really good. Not the kind of thing you just grab a handful and shove in your mouth, though. You pick at it, so you're getting a little bit of everything. She also brought some grapes and some cheese. It was a nice snack, and I'm very grateful for her. Thank you very much for bringing that. We all enjoyed it tremendously. So, I haven't even talked about the adventure yet. So, as we went on, basically the group had finished off the first wing of their adventure. They had cleared out the upper floors of Castle Caldwell, with the exception of one room they couldn't get into because it was magically held shut. Fine. They got back, they reported, and Master Caldwell was pretty happy with the result. I mean, they were able to map out the room that they couldn't get into simply by knowing where all the walls were. Unless there was walls inside that room, which there weren't, they had the upper floor mapped out. They were happy. He was happy about that. And if it was sealed shut, presumably something couldn't come out again. But if he's going to claim to be the master of the castle, he can't let that stand. So, events transpired. So the group, however, was back. They were flush with money. They had thousands of coins and copper and silver, a little bit of gold, a little bit of electrum. They had cash. And I failed a little bit as a game master. I really shouldn't have let them do this, but at the end of the session, since it kind of wrapped up before everybody was ready to leave, I let them go spending. I didn't turn it really into a role-playing event, and I do regret that. I also regret kind of denying them a little bit on the experience, because I remember back in the day, when you would get back, the DM would give you all of the experience for the monsters that you killed. Then you would sort out the treasure, find out how much your treasure was worth that you were hauling in, and you would get experience based on that. I did not do that, and I regret it. I just lump summed it, because this is a relatively short adventure, and I didn't, you know, I didn't, so I do regret that. But they were all, you know, I'm fairly certain that my total was about right, including the treasure that they had found and the monsters that they had defeated. Not always killed, but defeated. They earned about 1,000 experience. So I give them 1,000 experience. But when we opened, they had just finished, so they had some money. They still had some needs. And I basically said, okay, you're back. What do you want to do? It's night, but you know, you can still do stuff. The sun has not set yet. And so some of them went training right away. A couple of them have new armors, so they were practicing getting into the new armor and taking it off. Now they're trained. The cleric and the halfling are both trained warriors. We had Bella the halfling. We of course had Asfer the cleric. We had Marvin the magnificent, the magic user, and we had Rune the magic user. Quite the group. But they practiced with their new armor until they were comfortable with it, which they already understood how plate works, so they were fine. Marvin decided he wanted to practice throwing daggers because that seems to be a big part of his offense. So he threw daggers at trees. And Rune just kind of got ready to tuck into his new scrolls, because I allowed the group to buy scrolls off of their mentor, who is the wizard Melkor. Melkor is a kind of a failure as a magician, as a magic user. He got up to the 5th level. He can throw a fireball. Matter of fact, that is his go-to spell. But he is an alcoholic, and he frequently drinks while adventuring, so no adventuring party wants him. Nobody wants a drunken wizard throwing fireballs in their midst. So he is pretty much banned from most adventuring groups, but he knows enough to take on apprentices to support himself. So he put up a tower, and he's got at least 2 apprentices right now. Any other apprentices will be Schrodinger's apprentices. They will appear if anybody's character dies and they want to re-roll and they end up rolling another magic user. Could happen. So, all the group did something relatively minor. Then I recommended, you know, most adventurers, as a kind of a blowing off steam when they've gotten through the stresses of an adventure, will often go to the tavern. And really, there's not a lot of social scenes in this small town. There's an inn with a common room. There's a tavern, which is very, very popular. Not necessarily for the locals, who, as tradesmen, they don't have large piles of coin to go out and go drinking with, but every once in a while they'll go out and splurge. And of course, when the caravans come in, that's when they make a lot of their money, because they all want to, you know, have a few, spend some of their coin guarding or working for the caravan, or the merchant, enjoying himself a little bit when he gets into a town and not roughing it out in a campsite. So they went to the tavern. Marvin first. Marvin went in. Marvin met an interesting character, a barmaid who was a bit of a vamp. Her name was Barside. And Barside thought she was beautiful, and she enjoyed the company of adventurers, so she tried to ingratiate herself with him. Marvin, however, he's got really good charisma. He is socially clueless, so he completely missed her attempts at being very friendly. And so he ordered a feast for one, and he just sat down and started eating. And I described the food, and the food was actually really good. Solid, hearty Frontiers food. And they actually had some really nice bread and stuff. So, they had some exotic things that they made and were able to charge a good price. And so, it cost him a gold, but, he ate well. Then Astrid comes in, after talking to the High Clerist of their little temple, and he basically told her that he'd been having visions that something very bad was coming. And it was a swell of darkness that was rising up in the area. And to that point, he dutifully contacted in Hightown the temple there to see what assistance they could give, and they instructed him that they were equipping and sending a Lightbringer, who is kind of an inquisitor for the light. They are uncompromising clerics who favor martial skills, so they're not the healers and curers. They're the I go out, find evil, and I smash it. So they prefer a spiritual hammer to a cure moderate wounds, for instance. So all of that going on, she then was advised to make sure she kept her mace about her, because a young cleric can never be too careful out on the night streets when bad people sometimes show up, and it's a small town, there are a lot of bad people. But she went out armed. She got to the tavern, and Marvin waved her over, and she sat down and started eating some of his food. He couldn't have eaten all of the food that he got, because remember, Barside was trying to butter him up. Barside ignored her, because she knew she wasn't going to get any extra tips out of her. So, clerics, they can be kind of tight. And they had a little time chatting. Bella decided she was going to get out of her adventurer's garb together. No armor, no weapons. She just went out in her frock and went to the tavern, ordered some food with her money, drink. Now, Marvin was a little flustered, and he ordered alcohol. Probably meaning wine or beer, but they really only have one distilled spirit. It's a little bit like paint thinner. So Marvin was getting toasty. And Rune shows up, and Rune also gets approached by Barside, but Rune's kind of coolly just kind of brushed her off. And some things happened, nothing of any great note that need be recorded here in this missive. So the group enjoyed the night, basically, and then they went their own separate ways. There was a little bit of chit-chat. Marvin left early. And there was some chit-chat with some under-clerics talking about how some people had been disappearing out on the very edges of the civilization. A few shepherds had vanished, and their flocks were untouched. A few ranchers vanished, but their herds were untouched. So there's something mysterious going on out there. There's definitely problems, and it might take a young group of adventurers to deal with at some point. Setting up things for future, of course. You gotta keep tying threads into things. So they went to bed. The next day they woke up. Marvin did not seem like himself. Marvin usually refers to himself in the first person. It's always, Marvin would like this, or Marvin asks you to do this. Not this time. He's a little surly with his friends who, they had an encounter. But for the most part, he's kind of been knocked out of that a little bit and seems a little bit surly about how, life is. But, that happens sometimes. And the group did some quick buying. They bought a few things that they would need. For instance, well, going back to the temple, the High Clerist was approached by Astrid, and he said that if their group was to go back out to Castle Caldwell, he'd heard about the sealed room, and he had a really bad feeling because he knew from histories that there had been crypts underneath that castle. And since it had gone abandoned, the appropriate rites and things had not been performed, so evil magic could have crept in, and he feared that the undead might be present. So he offered to cast a spell that would protect them against the undead, giving them a weapon that they could possibly use to banish any undead. And she was grateful for that. So she took these warnings back to the rest of the group. They bought some light food and had a little picnic breakfast because it was a nice day out. And they were discussing, what to do when they were met by Clinton Caldwell, the Grand Merchant. And he expressed his gratitude for the work that they had done. He told them that they were by far the best adventurers in the town because they had accomplished their mission, and all the other lazy layabouts that he had hired to try to press back the chaos, most of them had gone missing, a couple had died, more of them had just left, and only 5 out of the whole lot of layabouts in the town came back at all. So this was, not something that was completely unexpected, but it was a little discouraging. Some of those people probably went off and became bandits, now armed with a short sword and a barrel lid shield. To expand the influence of the town and to get more of the resources that he's going to need if he's going to put up a castle nearby, he started building a henchman's hall where laborers can come and get hired out and maybe get training and things. And he's building an armory with an honest-to-goodness forge, trying to attract the services of a weaponsmith or an armorsmith so that anybody he hires will be able to get the kind of equipment that they need. Because the general store just can't cut it. They got lucky that they happen to have a suit of plate mail the right size for them and such. But after that, if they want anything exotic, they just don't have a lot. So it's enough for a small town, everything they need, although at quite high prices. But they're looking for more from this town eventually. So Caldwell asked if they would consider sticking around to help him out with further projects. He was sure there was going to be more that needed to be done to bring civility to the land. And for the most part, they were okay with that. Caldwell paid what he promised. The work wasn't terribly, dangerous. I mean, yes, they all had gotten knocked out and stripped of all their belongings, but that was because their own spell had backfired. True, their thief had died, but he didn't see that trap. That's kind of his thing, and, well, he died from a trap. A thief dying from a trap is kind of not really ironic considering the probabilities involved with the first level character, but it was a learning experience. We'll just go that way. Their dwarven warrior had died, but he had been injured previously out of his armor, and he continued to press on to the front and opening a door, so that had happened. And then the cleric had died, but that was just the attrition of battle. That happens sometimes. And she had already been wounded too, so they really were having a hard time managing the risks, but now that they've got all the experience of what they've done, they're more seasoned as adventurers, even though they're still first level, ready to progress onward. So, with that, the group had, they all basically said, sure, we'll do that. Now, the 2 mages had to cast a read magic spell so they could understand the scrolls that they had purchased so they could write the spells into their spell book. Marvin choosing to comprehend languages, or read languages as it's called, and Rune choosing charm person as the spells that they are now able to memorize for their daily spell. This could be interesting, certainly. And again, they didn't have a lot to do that day. The major thing was because they'd passed on the warnings Asford got from the High Clerist, she realized that there could be some nasty undead in the area, and all the group expressed a desire to have some healing potions and maybe some holy water as a weapon against the undead. So she went on a buying spree. I didn't realize I'd given out that much money. But she got a healing potion and holy water for everybody in the group, including the 2 missing members. So they are armed now, interestingly enough. So the group now has healing potions aplenty. They have everything that they think they should need. They got all their starting gear. There's really nothing in the store that they can't afford. So they should have everything they want. And they spent the rest of the night. The mages were happy. They got their spells. No real hijinks happened. There were no other encounters of any memorable nature. They just had a good night, got an early sleep, and the next morning they were awoken by a messenger saying, "Crap's gone down. We need you to go to see Master Caldwell immediately." So they did. Got all their stuff together and off. And Caldwell's like, oh, actually, before that prior day, they'd found out that Master Melkor, the wizard, had been hired by Caldwell to go and open up that sealed door. He knows the knock spell, so he can defeat a magical barrier. And he went off, and didn't come back until the night. He came back, badly singed from his own fireball. He told them that he had opened up the door, something came at him, he fireballed in panic, the blast hit him. He didn't say what happened to whatever he fireballed, but he took off. He ran away. So something happened, certainly, but in a sealed door that hadn't been opened, with no way in or out, whatever was there, he reasoned might have been undead, because a living creature would have needed food. Nobody would have just stood in that doorway. Only something with the patience of undeath could have done that, he reasoned. It might have been something due to the fact the group told him where Caldwell's wine stash was in the carriage that he took out, and he drained it all. They don't know. But the next day, they're loaded for bear now, hearing that, yeah, there might be undead down there. They're ready. So, now that Caldwell knows the door's open, he's like, they spiked it open. You'll be able to get in there. But I need somebody to clear those crypts out. I've heard they've got my castle's got crypts. I'd like the crypts cleared. So their point of view is, yeah, okay, we'll do it. No problem. We're your folks. Despite the fact they're 2 members down, this was, fairly late in the night. There was really only about time for another hour's worth of role play, so I didn't think that they were going to get into too much danger. So they took the carriage once again. This time they did not have the fellow in green with the crossbow, but quite honestly, the surrounding monsters and monstrous humanoids have been quelled, so there was no attacks on the carriage. The driver was as friendly as ever. Is all. "So, you're back, are you? Good. We'll probably not die this time, maybe." He's fun. So they get to the castle, and they're pretty sure that if that door is open and there's undead beneath, the entire castle is probably overrun with undead now. They get there, and there is a living guard in chainmail with a polearm standing in front of the door. They're cheered by this. And the guard doesn't let them in until they hear it that Caldwell gives them permission to go in, so he lets them in. And they meet the bailiff, who now no longer is dressed in that ceremonial chain that he was wearing before. He's dressed kind of like a butler. And he grumbles as he leads them in. And sure enough, they're familiar with the inside, which has been getting cleaned. It looks better. Not quite livable yet. There's still a lot of things that have to go into it, but it's better. And he takes them along the hall and brings them to the door that was sealed. It has been spiked open. And looking into it, there's a staircase going down, as they knew because Melkor had told them that. And the room had been scorched. Yeah, a fireball had definitely gone off in here. And as they looked around, nothing was moving. So, now before this, I would be remiss if I didn't say that they had actually gone to the henchman's shop to procure the services of somebody, because they realized that if they're taking all the beatings, the chances of their characters dying gets better and better, as they had proven. So they went and they hired 2 people. They hired a dwarf named Bimley, kind of a quiet lad, and they hired a yappy thief named Shadowspawn. Shadowspawn is an inside joke based off of a character who was based off of another character named Shadowspawn in the excellent anthology of Robert Asprin's Thieves' World that had a lot of fantasy writers writing for it. It was really good. I highly recommend it. It's a little gritty, but it's some good stuff. Shadow Spawn was a notorious thief in that story. The character that I was referencing was just a dude who named his character Shadow Spawn because he liked that character. He got teased for it roundly because it's kind of a silly name. I am Shadow Spawn. You're untrustworthy. Knives out for you. So he calls himself Shadow Spawn. Everybody got a chuckle out of that. Shadow Spawn, however, kind of idolizes Marvin. Marvin's got fantastic charisma. And also Asfred has fantastic charisma, so he is quite loyal. Bimley got plate armor from Melvin. Melvin decided he wants to buy a henchman, so he bought him great armor. Bimley's happy. Bimley has got really good morale. So, they're loyal as you reasonably could get. They're also costing them 10 gold pieces and 2 gold pieces, respectively, a day. But here's the fun part. With Bimley there, they now have somebody to go in the front lines. He can take a good shot. He's a stout dwarf. And when they went to the staircase, they looked down after shuffling through their marching order. And they looked down. Oh, and by the way, the character playing as Marvin is still doing mapping. Everybody kind of agreed that he was really good at it. So, all right. They look down the staircase. It goes down 10 feet, and then it ends at a blind landing. 5 feet, blank stone, no passages out. Suspicious. They had Bimley take a look with his infravision, and he goes, well, there's nothing there except for the cool air coming in from the hidden trapdoor underneath. Oh, thank you, Bimley. So they go down and they find a catch that they can reach their hands in and lift it up. It's counterweighted, so it's not as heavy as a solid stone slab would be. And it folds up and recesses into the back wall of the alcove, which if they didn't have somebody really looking, they might have figured out that there's something like this because there's a slight recess that they couldn't have seen from the top of the top of the staircase. So once that's removed, they see a stone slab with a hole in it. That hole is a shaft leading down into a room below. Dropping a torch in revealed that the room below is only about 10 feet below the level of the slab, so it's about 6 inches down and 10 feet to the floor. But when they dropped the torch, they heard, "Hey, you almost hit me." That's when they met Tom. Tom is just a guy. He's human. He looks a fair bit like Marvin, actually. Same kind of tall, kind of a little bit lanky, lean features, fairly good looking. Wearing a blue cloak or blue robe with a hood. And he looked up, and he explained to them as they interrogated. They had an interesting discussion just trying to get him to reveal himself, but he didn't. He expressed that he'd been shot at before by people trying this kind of thing, so they basically bribed him over with food. And he told them that he was a scribe, and while he was on holiday, he was examining a carnival. And at the carnival, they had a magical item that he couldn't help but touch, and it teleported him into this dungeon. And that he'd been making do for himself for some time. Now, when he was doing this, he learned a little bit about the other dungeon inhabitants, that they're all crazy and bloodthirsty. Anytime he tried to meet anybody or had an encounter, it always ended in him running away to the safety of the darkness. And he's human, so darkness is relatively, it's pretty relative as far as safety goes. He's told him there were some bugs that were in a room behind a door. He told him there were some madmen who came at him with knives. Generally, he's had a bad experience. Some quick questions. He's learned how to survive in the dungeon by eating moss and things. Doesn't like it, but that's better than death. But at this point, they're like, okay, we'll get you out of there. So they lower a rope and they haul Tom up, and Tom's grateful. They offer to let him out of the castle, and he takes them up on their offer. He doesn't want to stay in here. So he thinks that being outside is certainly better than being stuck down in a dungeon with no way out. And with that, they take Tom out. At first, there's a talk about whether or not they should, imprison him in a room in the castle until they can, do more. But they kind of discount that. Tom seems like a pretty good guy, just a victim of circumstance. And he did give them some information about what to expect going on into the dungeon. So they basically just let Tom out and wished him the best of luck. And Tom was grateful enough to do that. So the group goes back to the previously warded room, to the shaft, lowers the rope. This time they secure it with a spike they drive into the mortar of the flagstones, and they descend. And they find a room that's exactly as Tom described to them. It's a 40-foot by 30-foot room. There is a partition which forms a hallway leading out of the room. This room is completely dark, but it's finished stone, and nothing attacks them. It's all quite quiet. They don't do a lot of investigating yet because they just get in, and it was really running close to the end of the night. So as the group descended down, that's pretty much where we ended it. So they know there's more things in this dungeon. They haven't heard a lick about the undead, although he did warn them at the end of the hall, which does wrap around down here, there was a feeling that he got of really bad badness. Could it be darkness threat? Maybe. They don't know. But all told, plenty of reason for them to be on their guard. And hopefully next time, they'll be accompanied by their elfin thief again, so they'll have the full group plus 2 henchmen. So, could be very interesting moving forward. That's what happened, the scaled down version. If you want the full version, it's got topics that aren't quite as safe for work, but that's in another video. But this is basically all that happened. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. I am Rob. This has been my State of the Dungeon address. Looking forward to the next session. So thank you very much. Until next time, farewell.